Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Agricultural Advisory Committee meeting of January 17th, 2022. It's been a while since we've had a meeting, and I want to welcome everybody back. And thank you for joining us today. I've taken attendance, and I'm going to start with the election of chair and vice chair. So I'd like to open the floor to nominations for the position of chair of the Agricultural Advisory Committee. Any nominations? Mr. Guest.
I'd like to nominate Kevin Hodge for chair.
Okay. Kevin, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I will.
Okay. And is there any more nominations for the position of chair? Okay. Can I get a motion to close nominations? Mayor Bailey and Councillor Miller. And is there any nominations for the position of vice chair?
I nominate Ken Guest.
And Ken, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any more nominations for the position of vice chair?
I move nominations closed.
Sorry, who moved that? I missed that.
I think that was Owen.
Owen moves? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I can't hear sometimes.
And do I have a second to close nominations? Mayor Bailey, thank you. All right, Mr. Hodge, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Pleasure. Thanks for taking the time. So we'll move on to number 3, approval of the agenda. Any additions or deletions? Seeing none, a motion to approve and a seconder.
I will so move. Owen.
Owen, seconded by Ken. All those in favor? Say aye or motion. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? See none, thank you. Number 4, declaration of pecuniary interest. Please declare so at the appropriate time, if any. And seeing that, we're on to 5 already, delegations petitions. 5.1, on-farm diversified uses. Matt, please.
Thanks very much. And I'll introduce myself quick as well, because there are some new faces here that I haven't met yet. So my name's Matt Vaughan, Director of Development Planning. We have been busy over the last couple of years working on a number of policy initiatives. One of those initiatives is called an on-farm diversified use policy. We now have that policy in place through our official plan and through our zoning bylaw, and we have had some farmers using it. And one of those farmers today, we've put together a short demonstration video just about what an on-farm diversified use is and how it's being used in our agricultural area. If you bear with me for just a minute, I will load up the video for us.
The County of Brant supports our farmers diversifying their farms, and to provide support, we've created an on-farm diversified use policy. Why look to diversify? Many farms in the County of Brant rely on seasonal income. Diversifying your farm can help stimulate personal income, support our local economy, and continue generational farms for years to come. Examples of diversified use include woodworking and metalworks, small-scale storage, bakeries, retail, restaurants, event spaces, and more. Brantview Apples, located in St. George, is an excellent example of a farm that has diversified operations, operating their 200-year-old orchard with a retail cider business and event space.
In the last 5 or 6 years, we branched out. As you see, we're in the bakery. We converted our old bunkhouse into a bakery. Our older daughter, she looks after the event pavilion. Our middle daughter, it was just when the craft beer craze was starting to take a hold, and she and I went to Purnell and took the Cider 101 course. And in the midst of all that, the province changed the laws so that included fruit wines and hard cider. So that was the perfect storm for us. We've actually opened the patio in the orchard, so you can come and have a flight of cider in the actual orchard. We bought some picnic tables and put up some sunshades, and you can go right in the orchard and have yourself a flight if you like.
To learn more and to see if your project would be eligible for the On-Farm Diversified Use Program, contact our Economic Development Division today.
Okay, so yeah, that's just a quick short video about on-farm diversification, how it works, and just some examples. I'm available if there's any questions from the committee about that new policy initiative.
Mr. Miller or Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Matt. Matt, just watching that reminded me of one incident we have, an issue we had there a few years ago, and that's concerning how does MPAC treat these guys? Or does it depend on the scale of that operation? Like I don't think they want to go to on-farm use, diversify, and then find out that they're going to be put in a commercial category or anything like that. Any thoughts on that? Or is it something you warn people about or before they embark?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Miller, it's a good question. I can speak a little bit from experience, actually. So our farm down here in near Clear Creek, we employ an on-farm diversified use here. MPAC does look at the use of the property, not just because it's in the agricultural area. So if you are conducting a commercial use, then they would reclassify a portion of a building to a commercial tax or an industrial tax. It sort of depends a lot on the use. That's how MPAC would do it. So going into this type of thing, so when we get an inquiry from the public or from an agricultural operation and whether they want to move into an on-farm diversified use, it is something that we bring up as part of our pre-consultation process, that taxes may be affected as part of a conversion from an ag use to an on-farm diversified use. Luckily, we've got an expert on our team and our general manager, Pam Dusling, who's studying this as part of her PhD studies. She's also here for this meeting. She might have a little bit to add to that as well.
Matt, thanks, and hello, everyone. The only thing that I'll add to Matt's good comments there are that through our research, we found that these impacts take quite a while. So MPAC usually takes some time to assess the new use. It can be many years even that farmers don't get taxed at that new level. So that's the only thing that I'll add, Matt. Thanks.
Okay, appreciate the answer. Through Mr. Chair. The only thing I would maybe that's something that they should be at least made aware of, I guess, because like I say, looking at it, I always thought that, or we're under the understanding that as long as it was grown on farm, processed on farm, they'd be okay, but I could be wrong on that. But it might be something that I think any potential people interested in it should at least be made aware so that they can at least do some proper financial statements when they're trying to work it out. Just a thought. So.
The chair to Councillor Miller, just as a quick follow-up, and our policy planner Brandon just reminded me of this. There is a tax program that the county has signed up for that helps with some of this tax. So it's not 100% commercial tax. If it's commercial use, there's a little relief there. So if you'd like, we can follow up with that and get more information to you on how that program works.
Okay, through the chair, thanks. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Do they have to, is there any kind of a zoning change has to happen?
So through the chair to committee member McIntyre, while with the new policies in place, if what they are proposing is considered to be an on-farm diversified use, and keep in mind there are some size and scale requirements to that use. If they fall within those parameters, then a zoning bylaw amendment and an official plan amendment would not be required. They would be permitted outright. This is a good thing. It saves people lots of time, lots of money, and they can just move forward with their project. But again, It comes down to them making sure that they fall within the parameters. And the big one here is size and scale and how it interacts with the surrounding uses. Mostly, concentrated around whether or not it conflicts with the agricultural uses around it. That's the big one. It just can't conflict with those agricultural uses.
Thank you, Matt. I have a few questions. So this is a planning policy then? Am I understanding this correctly, or?
Yes, that's correct. This is something that has now been implemented in our official plan and our zoning bylaw. And as we move forward with our new official plan, this will be something that is transferred into our new official plan.
So it's to streamline the process and make it more, should I say, farmer or user friendly then?
Yeah, that's correct. And as a follow-up to that as well, so not only is the policy in place, but we've developed a new stream of site plan approval. We will be taking our on-farm diversified uses through what we refer to as minor site plan application. And there are some things about that process that are very streamlined. It takes a lot less time to go through. The circulation is a lot shorter. The cost is a lot less. And there's just a lot less requirements than our regular site plan process.
Okay, and how long ago did this policy change? When was it basically initiated?
This was all within the last year. So we've been very busy over the pandemic. This is just one of many substantial policy changes that we've introduced into our planning documents. But this is the one probably that affects our agricultural community the most.
Are there any other counties using a similar policy this time?
Yes, there are. Norfolk County uses a similar policy. And I do believe there are a number of other rural municipalities using this policy framework as well. Pam may know of more than me off the top of her head because this is something she's studying and examining in other countries. So I'll pass that question over to Pam.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. There are some municipalities that have official plan policies, like the County of Grey. Most two-tier municipalities have not implemented it at the local level. I think the County of Brant, City of Ottawa, and County of Norfolk are those that have.
Thank you. Thank you. Sounds it's a great way to absolutely grow the farm economy, right? Streamline the process. Great to hear that. Is there been much uptake? Any applications since it's been initialized, Matt?
We've had, I want to say, around a handful of applications that have come in. Some are still in our pre-submission consultation process. So this, one of the reasons why we created the video actually is just to broadcast that we have this new policy framework in place so that farmers can use it, they can diversify their operations. So I expect that once we get the word out there through social media, we have used that in the past already, but I think we just need to make a little bit more push through our economic development process. And I think the more people who know about it, the more uptake we'll have with it.
Very good. Any other questions from the committee at this time for Matt? Councillor Miller?
Just a comment there, Kevin, if I could, because I've seen it at work in other places, and you look at those lavender farms there in Norfolk. We went down there, extremely busy, and then we've seen some on-farm wineries. I thought they were having pretty good success. I hope their bottom line is showing it. And then I think there's a couple of cheese places going too. So there's a lot of potential. So yeah, we're just in the early stages. So I'm actually quite hopeful that we'll see some good things come about. So because I know they're out there.
I wonder if it's possible through SCORE or through some of the other farm organizations, we get the word out as well. It becomes more widely known because, like Councillor Miller is talking about, there is great potential in ag. We're only just tapping it now. We're kind of moving from the phase of being producer to being trying to retail trying to close the loop. So we could really grow this farm economy if we, and we're working together and move things forward. So I wonder through other organizations, we get the word out as well.
Yeah, we can follow up.
Richard here.
Yes.
How is this different than what other people are already doing, like with Steel Wheel Brewery and other things already happening in Brant County? Do they need to? I mean, I'm not sure what the difference is by signing up, if they're already doing something.
No, it's a great question through Chair Hodge to member Tunstall. It is something that's now just permitted outright. So those businesses that came before this policy would have had to go through an update to our official plan, an update to our zoning bylaw. They likely were subject to our full site plan full application. But now that we've introduced this policy and we've introduced a new site plan stream, it makes the process significantly easier for farmers. That's the big difference.
Okay, thanks.
Cutting the red tape, in other words.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Any other questions from committee? Mr. Mayor?
For you, Mr. Chair, not really. Just to let you know that our official plan is still with the province. So I think once our official plan is back and we have the blessing of the province, we can advertise it more and we can put it out there to the public a little bit stronger. But right now, it is all dependent on what the province does with our official plan.
Thank you. Any other questions for Matt? Seeing none, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
No problem. So with that, we're on to 6, adoption of minutes from previous meetings, 6.1, all the way back January 20th, 2020. And we might as well move them all at the same time. Another meeting, February 7th, 2020. Do we have a mover?
I'll look good.
Councillor Miller, seconded by member Guest. Any discussion? Errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Any business arising from the minutes? Is pre-pandemic. How long it's been, right? I remember those. I was still harvesting corn that winter. That's how backward that fall was. Okay, seeing none, we're on the staff reports. 8.1, comments on the rural and ag policies and new official plan. Who's going to present that for us?
Thank you, Chair Hodge. My name is Jennifer Boyer, the Manager of Policy Planning. It's nice to see everyone here today. I'll start off the report for you today. And I'd like to acknowledge all the other committee members and also including Mayor Bailey and Councillor Miller. So thanks for being here today. And I also noticed the minutes from January 2020 when I sort of was taken quite aback because that's actually when we actually last presented to you and the new official plan was on the agenda. I was actually out of the country at that time and Ruchika had done the report for you because we had launched the new official plan by then, and it's unbelievable how 2 years has flown by. A lot of deja vu happening lately. So what we're going to do today is today's presentation is obviously focused on very agricultural based policies for the new OP. And as you know, we've circulated you a few times throughout the process, and we thank you for those lately for sending us some comments. Very well received, so thank you very much. So we do have a short presentation for you focusing on agricultural systems approach. Just to update those that you may not be aware of what's happening. Brandon and I will do some presentations and then we're welcome to take any questions. But I'd like to acknowledge our staff that are here today as well. If you do have any further questions, we do have obviously Pam Dusling, our General Manager of Development Services, and obviously you've seen Matt as well today. We also have my colleagues, so you'll see Brandon Courtleaf, and we have Michelle Schafel, also Jessica Kitchen, as you know us as the official plan team. So we're all here in the background, and we're very much a team effort, as those of you who know us. So I'd like to have Pam just say a few words before we introduce, just to tell us where we're at in the process, and then we'll take it away.
Thanks, Jen. It's my pleasure that Jen and her team are here today to share the OP with you today, kind of an overview of the policies and where they're at. I can kind of summarize it quickly and as to say we're kind of at the end of the process now, which is so nice to be able to say that. Jen and Brandon and Michelle and Jessica. They've been working very hard during the pandemic since you last saw them. It's been challenging to put forward an official plan during this time, especially with public consultation, but they have pivoted well and done a great job in getting a lot of participation online and through different resources. Typically in the past, we would have had public meetings where people come and look at boards or do presentations in public, and we've had to do that all via virtual the last 2 years. They've gotten an astounding amount of information. They've funneled it back through different drafts. Council has endorsed a final draft of the official plan, which is at the province right now. And we're waiting patiently, waiting for a response on that. And Jen and her team are very hopeful that within the next few months, they'll be able to wrap it up and we'll get a final version of the official plan and be waiting for the province approval. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jen and her team to talk more about the policies, particularly the agricultural policies today in the new OP. Thanks, Jen.
All right, thanks very much, Pam and Chair Hodge. So I'll just turn it over to our staff, but I just wanted to make you aware of the attachments to this report. We've specifically tailored it, as I said, agricultural focus. We've written a report to summarize some of the information that's come forward over the past 2 years, but especially in the last 6 months. And as Pam said, that we do have a draft OP at the province. It's unfortunately been 5 months as of today that we submitted the draft to the province. The 90-day window ended on November 17th, and we are still waiting. And I understand that we are one of the first municipalities in the Golden Horseshoe in the door. And the conformity date to the growth plan is still July 1st, 2022. So it's quite interesting in terms of the timing, and we know that the election is going to be early June, and the writ drops sort of for the election sort of mid to late April. So it's the timing is of the essence here, and we're curious to see what happens. And I do have a follow-up meeting with the province coming up to see where things are at. So that being said, we will go through some of the report information and the attachments. And as I said, we're here to answer any questions you have, but let's take it away in terms of a quick overview right now, which Brandon will bring up. And as I've said, we've done an introduction and we've introduced you to the team, because you may not know of us too much over the past few years. But I guess the basis is, where are we at in terms of creating a new OP? Really, this is a strategic priority of council. It's actually number one in terms of a growth management strategy, and all the pieces that fall in between how we create that for the County of Brant. And like I said, it's a provincial conformity exercise. We do sit in the growth plan of the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and they put a conformity date, as I said, to July 1st, 2022, where the county must adhere to the growth plan. And that includes updating something that's called a municipal comprehensive review for a land needs assessment, and actually updating your official plan. And as Pam introduced, our community feedback, our public engagement, and our engagement with Indigenous communities has played an integral part over the past 2 years. Doing it virtually, changing the consultation and engagement plan every few months to try to adapt to what's happening has been challenging, but I think we've done a great job, and we've been given a lot of thumbs up by other municipalities on the province based on our approach and how innovative we are with such a small team in-house. And then I guess the main impetus is about improving our implementation. As Matt talked about with on-farm diversified uses, that's just one of the things that we're rolling into this new OP. And today's focus specifically on agricultural policies is actually part of that and how we maintain our agri-food network and our agricultural systems approach. So next slide. So just as where we're at, it's hard to believe how fast time goes, but as we've talked about and as mentioned in the report, there's attachments to actually where we're at the draft OP stage. So we are in the phase 4 draft. It is still draft. We're still going through quite a few comments. And even today is very important for agriculture. And on February 8th, we'll be also have a report to the Policy and Strategic Initiatives Committee, which will also focus a lot on the rural areas and some of the updates we'll be making. And as we said, our timeline has shifted a bit about when we're getting a final OP. Unfortunately, without these provincial comments, we're in a bit of a waiting game to see how much further work we have to do. But we're looking into March and even into early April to try to get a final official plan to the province. Slide. So I guess overall, if you've been following along, as Mayor Bailey and Councillor Miller know, that we've got some fundamental assumptions which were presented at the December 2nd and December 9th special meetings of Council, which have been following us through over the past 2 years about how we create this growth management strategy. And definitely it's not focused just on our sort of larger communities like Paris and St. George. It actually has a lot to do with the rural area as well, because growth happens there, either residential or employment, and also supporting businesses is key as well, and the agri-food economy. But some of these assumptions are really about also the feedback we've received from the community, loud and clear about growth management, and also about keeping our rural areas intact, protecting the environment, our natural heritage systems, water quality, maintaining small town charm and character. And loud and clear, this was time and time again, for the 95% of the people we don't hear all the time, but we hear it, is to protect our agricultural lands, our rural communities, and also our natural areas. This message was so loud and clear over and over again throughout the entire 2 years of listening to the community. And of course, with that, supporting local jobs. And also just about one of the biggest things, which is a worldwide issue, national issue, provincial and municipal issue, is about housing affordability, attainability, and really the housing crisis, as you'd say, about how we provide housing for all ages, ranges of incomes into the future. Part of this is complete communities, getting people out in terms of walkability, active transportation, not just in our towns, but also outside in the countryside, dealing with transportation issues, which is also being done through a transportation master plan, and also infrastructure, not just the availability of services, but also providing services in the rural areas, such as community amenities and other things. So those were really part of the fundamental assumptions, but overall in terms of our land needs, if you've been following along, we do have a surplus of residential land, not just in Paris and St. George, but in the rural areas as well, which is called excess lands, but we have a shortfall of employment lands. So how do we balance those and where do we grow? Next slide. And I will turn it over to Brandon to finish off the presentation.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me all right. The thumbs up. Sounds like it. Good stuff. Perfect. So my name is Brandon Courtleaf. I'm one of the policy planners under Jen's team with Michelle and Jessica working on the official plan. So I'm just going to run through some of our tools that we're hoping to create with this new official plan, with the policies and feedback we've heard from our stakeholders and from those interested. The common feedback, as as Jen mentioned, it's definitely been about protecting farmland and really supporting the small town character of the county. So you'll see one of our excerpts there from one of our polls. We've asked over and over, are we doing enough to protect our farmland? And the answer is quite commonly no. So we're really looking at how that is not addressed by the current official plan and how it can be addressed by the new official plan. So part of that, that review that we've done, we've looked at what we're calling an agricultural systems approach. And I'll go through these a bit more in depth with each of the next slides, but we've talked about the ag systems approach, our agri-food network, agricultural impact assessment, so ensuring that there's land use compatibility between agriculture and other land uses. Looking at how aggregate operations in prime agricultural areas, the impacts of those, and what we can do to mitigate negative impacts. We've also done a good look at our rural settlement areas with a full review of the excess lands. And we've also invited site-specific review requests as part of this process as well, where property owners would kind of pinpoint some information about their specific property and help us kind of do a review of that property with the overall policies that would come forward with the new official. With that in mind, the agricultural systems approach is kind of our largest change with the agricultural policies of the new official plan. So this is something that's kind of handed down by the province. They've implemented this through their provincial policy framework, and they ask then that each municipality consider how they can approach the agricultural system for Ontario, for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and for our own municipality. There's a bunch of objectives that this ag systems approach provides us, one of them being better protection of our agricultural land base. So what do we mean by protecting the agricultural land base? So we want a continuous land base, not just the higher yielding soils. We recognize that there's a variety of farming operations throughout the county of Brant, both kind of prime agriculture and more kind of rural agricultural nature. And we want to make sure that there's a continuous protected system for that. So we're looking at clearly delineating what our prime agricultural area would be considered, and that would very much limit any sorts of non-agricultural development in those areas. So really prioritizing agriculture and making it very clear that our official plan is doing that. So another objective that would reach is that it kind of increases our consistency with how we apply our land use policies, both provincially, municipally with our neighbors, and as well in the county of Brant. So we're reviewing Planning Act applications, building permit reviews, all of the development types of things we get in. We'd be reviewing them very consistently. We've been collaborating with OMAFRA, with the province, quite a bit. We've been meeting with them, I think, almost quarterly, just on these policies and mapping and plans. And they've been very helpful giving us information that we've been able to use with our reviews. We've also been able to touch base with neighboring municipalities, with farmers, local businesses, all with kind of the common interest in our agri-food sector. We were actually the first to complete our kind of agricultural system review and the new official plan. So the first one in the door, so to speak, as Jen mentioned. And we were actually able to present to a forum held in Southwestern Ontario by the province to present kind of our approach, our agricultural systems approach, and some of the other policy approaches our new official plan is taking. So we are very proud of the direction that we're taking, and we look forward to comments and feedback from folks like yourselves, folks that are really involved with our agricultural economy and with agriculture. And I think this Chair Hodge that mentioned closing the loop kind of between production and retail. That's another one of our big goals here, making sure our policies speak to all of that, not just protecting the land base, but protecting the network itself. And you'll see that kind of here on another example of our mapping. What we've done is we've kind of done an analysis of where there are larger clusters of assets. So this is the example of our farming assets, so where there's farms located in the county. So the brighter yellow is where there's a higher density of farming. And you'll see that there are some pockets of that. So this is one of the ways that we can use our policies to kind of track how farming is going in the county and ensure that we are supporting both the land base and the network in a way that's appropriate. how would we know if we're succeeding if we're not tracking those things? So that's one of the things that this official plan, the agricultural systems approach, is really looking at doing. And we'll definitely be diving into more data, chatting with folks like yourselves, with the federations of agriculture, to get some more actual data that we can use to track the successes of this policy. Another one of the tools that we've been able to use during this official plan process is that of the site-specific review requests. So you'll see some of the mapping here that was also included in your package. I'll just point out too, on the top left map, the Paris North and East, number 83 there. In the mapping in the package, it actually shows the entire land holding of that developer. Some of it is within the boundary of Paris and some of it is outside, but we've just shown here that that was the area of land that was actually just the request for their expansion. I just wanted to note that. But in general, these maps are showing folks that are outside of our settlement area boundaries that have requested that their land be switched from agriculture or some sort of rural designation to something more urban. They'd like to accommodate growth with their land. They're looking into those interests, and we've been able to kind of review all of those along with the direction of the county to see what would and wouldn't fit for our direction. As Jen mentioned, we did have an excess of residential land, so that kind of automatically took residential considerations off the table. We don't need to expand for residential land, but we needed to look at employment land. One of the interesting things to note is how many of these requests we got. So I think it was over 4,400 hectares of land, so 1,800 acres roughly. People looking to switch from agriculture to some other sort of use. So that's quite a big chunk of land. So we had to kind of go through very particularly to see what really is and isn't worth it to help support both the agricultural economy and the greater economy of the County of Grant. You'll see here as well on the top right map for Oak Hill and Airport. There's a little area there, number 116 and 109. So based on comments provided by the City of Brantford as well, they've asked us to reserve some of those lands or consider those lands for future employment expansion. So that wouldn't happen likely till beyond 2051, but we're planning 30 plus years in advance with this official plan. So there's considerations like that as well that we've had to kind of look at what that conversion of agricultural land would mean and how it can benefit our economy or say the airport area there, but also how we can mitigate any negative impacts that it would have on agriculture. One of the big tools that the province has put into place is what we call an agricultural impact assessment. So any of those areas of land that you saw on the previous mapping, if they're expanding a settlement area boundary, expanding into an agricultural area, you'd be required to do an agricultural impact assessment. So we as the county, we're required to do that as well because we are considering an expansion at Powerline Road there, the 403 and Rest Acres Road. So parcels 8 and 9 on this particular map. Because we noted with our studies that we didn't have enough employment lands to support the County of Brant. We're looking at that expansion there in that particular area. We did assess some other alternative areas. And what we did was we prepared an agricultural impact assessment that helped us determine kind of where the best places to expand would be. So we did submit a draft version of that to OMAFRA, and we're still waiting for comments from them, as Jen mentioned. But it was about 60, 70 pages that spoke to kind of an assessment, the methodology, a full policy review. We would have to do MDS calculations. So we did some site investigations. We looked at soil quality, physiological information, weather, climate. There was a lot that falls into the agricultural impact assessment. And that's definitely something we'll be looking at sharing with this committee once we get some comments back from the province to recognize that we're going in the right direction. So it's quite a large piece of the agricultural impact assessment. And like I said, it needs to be done for any expansion of a settlement area. And so we are looking at using that specific tool and scoping that tool in our new official plan so that if there are development applications that we receive, they'll have to do a similar type of assessment to let us know their expansion of a non-agricultural use, what impacts it might have in an agricultural area, how to mitigate that, and then put some solid recommendations forward to make sure that those mitigation efforts actually happen. One of the other tools and implements was our rural settlement area review. We're looking at our rural settlements under our policy framework of the provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. One of the kind of key changes with our new official plan here is how we classify our settlement areas. So essentially anything that doesn't have full municipal servicing infrastructure, so water and wastewater, or isn't being considered for full municipal water and wastewater servicing within the time frame of this OP is being considered a rural settlement area. And the provincial policies really limit what types of growth can be directed to those areas. And that is done for good reason. We want to make sure that we're not overexpanding our settlement areas into farmland. We want to make sure that we're creating compact communities in those areas that won't have businesses closing down, that we're putting enough people there that they can support those local businesses. And we're really looking at offsetting our impact on agriculture. And we're looking at doing that by reorganizing our designations with the new official plan. So we did a technical analysis. We determined that we have excess residential lands, as Jen mentioned. That technical analysis for our rural settlements looked at lot sizes, fragmentation, soil quality, the assessed use of the land, so if it's farmed or not, future needs for our growth, nearby uses, impacts of natural heritage. There are quite a long list of things we had to look through. And we wanted to make sure that the color that is painted on those properties and those areas in the new official plan really does reflect the balance and the benefits we want to see from the lands in the county and our objectives for the future. So like we said, we received lots of feedback, council feedback included, to create strong growth management tools, stakeholder feedback, obviously people wanting to contribute to complete communities, to develop their lands, to create subdivisions. And we really have to try and balance all of that. So we've looked, I've included two examples here on these slides. So one is the area of Birch, that's the left-hand side here. And you'll see that the top map there shows the dotted line around what they would call the settlement area. And if you look at the bottom map there, the stuff highlighted in red, those are parcels that aren't assessed as farmland. They're really residential in nature. They weren't necessarily included in that settlement before, but that area did expand with its development. So maybe our direction on that development or that settlement area should look at changing, right? If it's a rural settlement and we're acknowledging that those areas aren't agriculture already, the policies that would apply to them if they were designated agriculture wouldn't necessarily benefit those lands. And then you can see on the other side, Scotland is an example. It's a settlement area that we know will likely not receive any servicing infrastructure expansions in the next 30 years. The yellow area there shows kind of what farmlands are within that settlement area boundary that have the potential for future expansions. And it almost sends a bit of a mixed message to folks in those areas saying that, oh, these are the areas that could expand right to this line, but growth isn't necessarily supposed to happen that quickly in those areas. So we are looking at kind of matching the designation with the active use and with the objectives of the county in total. So Scotland, like I say, is an example here. There's 200 or so hectares, 500 acres roughly, of land that is farmed, but has that kind of residential designation on it. And we aren't necessarily meant to expand into that farmland the same way it was permitted when those colors were placed on the maps back in 2000. So we're just looking at kind of a responsible way to grow, making sure that these policies really do balance agricultural protection and the rural community protection that benefits everyone. And with that, that was a lot of information in a short period of time, and we are reviewing, going over kind of the summary that we provided as well, and what the information that was in your reports. But what we're looking at here is just to kind of trigger some discussion amongst yourselves. If you have any questions of staff, we're happy to assist. And that way we can provide the comments and feedback from this particular committee to our council. We can take that as staff back as we finish up the official plan, and we can make sure that things really are reflective of the objectives of the Agricultural Advisory Committee. So with that, I will end the presentation unless Jen has anything further to add, but I will maybe hand it back to Chair Hodge, and then we can answer some questions.
Thank you. Brandon, can you go back a slide to Scotland?
Absolutely.
Please. I have a question of clarification.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there we go.
Okay, just looking at Scotland, is the intent to change the settlement boundary as it exists? Just a little bit like a re-changing into smaller rural settlements, or re-changing the settlement boundaries to more match their existing growth, or is it just a different way of designating it, but still keeping the settlement boundary the same?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the approach we took with the draft that was put forward in July and August was to change the settlement area boundaries. That is something we're looking at just based on feedback, if that approach is the best. Essentially, the objective is to ensure that any development happening in those areas is needed for those areas. It's done in an appropriate manner, and it's done in a way that meets the provincial policies. So the province essentially says your rural settlements aren't allowed to be bigger than kind of your built up area. And our settlement boundaries don't necessarily reflect that very well right now. So we're looking at just trying to match those two kind of dichotomies to make sure that we're not necessarily putting a stop to all development in rural areas. That's not something we want to do by any means. But maybe we don't need as much land with the line drawn around it as is there. So yes, to answer your question, the approach that we took with the draft was to move the settlement area boundaries. We are looking obviously at different considerations for that, but that is the consideration that was presented with the draft version.
Do you have a slide of Burford as well for the settlement boundary then, just for interest's sake?
So Burford is a good example actually of one it's a bit different. Scotland and Oakland were looked at very similarly to Burford under previous reviews, but because Burford is being studied for water servicing right now, so for servicing infrastructure, the province has a different policy structure that would apply to it. So there is quite a bit of land that is designated in Burford, and the way that our approach to that would be to protect the lands or take a similar approach would be similar to what we're doing in Paris and St. George. So the boundary doesn't move, but there's an overlay that's applied to the lands to make sure that they're developed in a consistent manner with whatever the results of the studies are. I can find a map here to show everyone. Because yeah, Burford is a good example of there's quite a bit of land kind of beyond the built up area that is designated, and it would be looked at just a bit different than Scotland and Oakland, for example. But if you just give me a couple of moments, I can find one for you. Just give me a moment here.
Sure, thank you.
And perhaps Chair Hodge, if I could add to that, if I could ask you that, thank you. And one of the issues with, well, especially Scotland, it was subjected to a planning application just a few weeks ago, is we have actually a lot of inquiries last week about Scotland. One of the issues is that the underlying zoning, especially for those areas that are shown on the map, do not match the designation. So what we have is an excess lands issue going on, because the underlying zoning of those parcels is actually agriculture holding or an A9. So a lot of those parcels have an A9 zoning underlying it, and they're not developable. And we've had inquiries about just this past week about, oh, are you changing the zoning? No, we are not changing the zoning through this exercise at all. In fact, it's those parcels that are shown on the map are actually agricultural zoning. So that's one of the issues that we're trying to clean up with this new OP, is that the zoning and the current official plan designation do not match. And there was also an excess of lands that was designated in the prior OP, and the new framework of the growth plan is pretty clear about what is excess. The alternative to this situation is that we keep the current settlement areas, but they're declared excess lands and they're prohibited development to 2051. So we've actually put forward an approach different to that, whereas we've shrunk up the boundary, but you can still apply for a minor rounding out. So that's the approach, but we are waiting for the comments on the province about that and to see what they would say. So it's an either or situation, and we think that we've chosen the more amenable situation to our rural communities. So I just wanted to add that. Burford's a little bit different. It actually has a built-up boundary like Paris and St. George. We are waiting for comments about the province about how we will apply that to our land needs assessment. About what approach Burford's going to take with our land needs. But Brandon can just show you what's current, and we aren't changing Burford in terms of its boundary because it has that built up boundary line, but Brandon can just point that out right now.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. And through Chair Hodge. So this is the map kind of Burford that was presented with the draft. You'll see the settlement area boundary here in pink, and then all of these kind of dotted area is beyond what we would call our built-up area. So built-up area here is really the stuff that's already established, and then our kind of non-built-up area here, so the designated greenfield area, which is much of it is still being farmed, it is noted here kind of with the dots.
Okay, thank you. I can see how this could be contentious for the smaller rural settlements as far as there could be confusion here about changing the settlement boundary. I understand a lot of this dates back to pre-amalgamation when we were the former townships, and we designated, or the townships that time designated lands, and then we amalgamated, and that's changed the dynamics here. So we're still living with decisions that were made 20, 30 years ago. At this point, we're trying to bring some clarity to it this time. Just a question for Jennifer. So there is potential for, let's say, Scotland for rounding out, you said, is that the right term?
Yes, Chair Hodge, that is correct. So the one issue is that as we're dealing, as our councillors and mayor knows, we're dealing with a lot of mapping error changes, cleanups from post-amalgamation, and also the growth plan, which came in 2006, which has not actually been fully implemented in the current version of the OP, and 2 provincial policy statements that we are not in conformity with. So it's a huge cleanup. That's why we're doing a new official plan, and it is a departure. But absolutely, the growth plan says for rural settlement areas, you can do a minor rounding out. Absolutely. So it's to have development beside the actual core boundary to then round out and follow a good pattern of growth and not leapfrog or hopskitch, or we call it development where it doesn't make sense. So it's good for a complete community in terms of road networks, actual servicing, trying to get people to walk. So absolutely, that's the approach that we've taken. We don't want to sterilize and do excess lands, but however, we are still waiting for the province's comments in that effect. If anyone's read the Haldeman decision, so mid-December, early December, the province issued comments on the county of Haldeman's municipal comprehensive review. They had the same issue as where they were dealing with excess lands of the rural settlement areas, and then what to do with that approach. So we're waiting for a similar sort of mandate from the province about that. So But this is a more amenable approach we found. Absolutely, they can apply for that.
Sure, that sounds good, because I was just concerned. I'm all for preserving farmland. We need to, but at the same time, the small communities need to have potential for some sustainable or some rounding out, I would say, to keep them growing to a certain degree.
And also, Chair Hodge, we've also received comments from the other side for our rural settlement areas. We've actually applied a designation to assist with that in the rural areas and hamlets where you can have additional uses. So, for instance, the designation is more of a hamlet or rural designation where you can actually have additional residential units, you can have mixed use businesses. So we're trying to encourage those opportunities as well. And we've actually, even last week, it was quite the week with some of the rural settlement areas. We've actually had people say, thank you, this will help me with my small business in the community, or thank you, I wanted to build this house or other unit, this is helping me. So we also hear the other side as well. Just wanted to pass that along too.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee?
Yes, Richard here, through you. Had a few questions. As far as the requests go, have they been finalized, or what's happening with all those requests?
Through Chair Hodge to Member Tunstall, are you talking about the site-specific requests and settlement area boundary expansion requests?
Yes, you've got some people are looking for residential, but you're saying you already have an excess. And some people are looking for employment lands. You're saying you don't have enough employment land, but how much of those requests do you need to, like, how many acres do you need for employment lands? Because you say you're deficient in them.
Through Chair Hodge to Member Tunstall, yes, that's correct. So through our land needs assessment, there's a couple things. We've presented this with the policy directions last June, the draft OP in July, and then December's meetings were actually a combination of all the comments received, all the feedback, and then council directed staff with various motions to move forward. But really the presentation was about the fundamental assumptions had not changed, whereas we do have an excess of residential lands, not just in our more urban areas of Paris and St. George, but also rural, but we have a shortfall of employment lands by 109 hectares. And these were mostly prestige employment lands, fully serviced. There's no availability left. So council has directed staff to look at the 403 Rest Acres corridor, and that's what Brandon presented with our agricultural impact assessment. But we've also looked at a future strategic employment land reserve for additional lands beyond our land needs to the next MCR and beyond. So council debated that on December 9th. To look even beyond that need, because the growth plan does allow municipalities to do that. So it's focused on, as Brandon showed you on that map, the 403 Rest Acres corridor to expand those two parcels to meet our shortfall of our need.
Okay, so and that's all the employment lands you're looking at right now?
That is correct.
So not the Cairnsville one or the airport one? You mentioned the airport.
So the airport, through the Brantford Airport Master Plan, it has a future vision to expand the one airport runway in 2035. And they also would like to reserve future employment lands to the west of that runway. So that was a schedule presented in the draft official plan. It also has some noise constraints associated with it as well. But it would be a future overlay, which would be to 2051 plus. So what it does is it doesn't change the underlying agricultural zone, but what it's doing is it's signaling a flag to say one day these lands may become employment, but until then, you cannot change the designation to anything different. So it's a reserve for the future. And then in Cairnsville, there were as you saw in the site-specific maps, we had quite a few. We had 5 requests in Keensville. 2 were employment land conversions. There were 3 proposals for expanding the boundary. In July, council asked staff to look at the merit of the PAPA lands as actually dry rural employment. So council directed staff to submit that to the province for review. And so we're still waiting on those results.
So with the Canesville, you switched residential to employment, or at least that's what it looks like there.
No, through Chair Hodge, Member Tunstall, no, we did not switch to
Okay.
residential. There's no residential in Canesville. It's maintained just for IC&I employment.
There, 98 and 99 look like they're a conversion request. No?
Perhaps I'll ask Brandon to maybe pull up the mat, Chair Hodge, if that's all right.
Absolutely.
No page.
So Member Tunstall, are you looking at the PAPA lands specifically? Or?
No, 98 and 99. Looks like it's a conversion from, I'm assuming, employment land to residential.
No, actually it's agriculture, prime agriculture to employment.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, so it was a settlement area boundary expansion to Canesville, the request, which was prime agriculture to employment.
Okay.
And
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and then council directed staff just for parcel 95 that it had merit and that staff consider that parcel 95 to be included, and it would have a site-specific policy attached to it for dry rural employment until services are available.
So rural employment means what exactly?
It means no services are available.
Okay.
Yeah, water and sewer. So 90, 94, 96, and 97 were not included.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of information in here. I had a couple of other questions. With all the site-specific plans, those are all in process now that you're talking about? All the site-specific plans you've mentioned in all the maps, are they still on the table as far as what you're doing with them? Or have they been, have you made a decision about any of those?
Yeah, through Chair Hodge. Yep, through Chair Hodge to Member Tunstall. So what staff did based on professional planning opinion and our review and the agricultural impact assessment is we made recommendations on each site-specific review. There were several hundred of them. That was attached to the December 2nd and 9th report. And then council had a chance to go through them on December 9th to ask questions and also debate on if any of them should be included, ask staff for their opinion. Then we had some council direction on a few of them. But other than that, the analysis has been done. And it's just those few that were considered that will be included. The other one was for Oak Hill. A parcel included in Oak Hill was council directed staff to have the portion of, if Brandon can pull it up, of Oak Hill. Yeah. On my glasses, it's number 111. So not the entire,
okay.
yeah, not the entire parcel, but a very small portion next to the residential area to consider that for minor rounding out.
Okay, that was one of my other questions is when you approve a residential, is there a density to all these residential approvals?
So for the
or does
oak, through the chair to Member Tunstall, so all of the ones are all employment. The only residential that was considered was this number 111. That is actually a rural residential because there's no sanitary available, so it would be large lots with septic.
And how many lots are you looking at?
I believe the applicant had asked for about 14 lots.
Okay. So, okay, thank you. I read somewhere, and I can't remember where I read, about existing development for rural lands. And an example that was given was a golf course. So how do you determine what goes on rural lands as far as it's, I think it was with the agritourism thing or so. I was a little surprised to see a golf course on there. And I wondered what other, you gave a couple of examples, but I'm wondering what's the range of examples that, do you have a list of range of examples that you would approve or not approve?
Through the chair to Member Tunstall, I'll get Brandon to answer this, but one of the other things we considered for the rural area, which was not consistent in our current OP, is we didn't have a proper parks and open space designation. So we've made one. And there are things that were not designated parks and open space, like the majority of our parks in Paris, which were urban residential. So they're getting parks and open space. Some of the golf courses will get parks and open space, including our trailer parks as well. So there's that designation, because that designation didn't exist properly in the rural area. There were also too many designations, but I'll get Brandon to jump in to answer that question.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. Through Chair Hodge to Member Tunstall. So those examples were provided as very kind of high level examples. Some likely would be permitted, some likely won't. Those are the types of questions we get from the public and from business owners looking to kind of place those types of businesses in areas outside of the settlements. The province tells us that we are allowed to, with the rural lands designation being different than the prime agricultural designation, we're allowed to permit resource-based tourism activities. As a municipality, we get to determine what the extent of that definition looks like. And that's something we're exploring with our new official plan. And that would be further kind of delineated by our zoning bylaw in the future. So if the resource-based tourism uses include things like treetop trekking or camping, like things like that, then and that's stuff we want to see in those areas. Maybe we put certain stipulations in place that require setbacks from certain types of development or agriculture. They'd all be assessed with an MDS application to make sure that they're amenable to the surrounding agricultural areas. But again, that's all hypothetical. We as a municipality get to decide what the extent of that use and that definition looks like moving forward. So that's where comments from folks like yourselves, if there's certain types of uses, like a golf course, for example, that you don't want to see in those agricultural areas, that's a great thing to note at this point. And it's something that we can just use that comment to approach those types of inquiries in the future and say, well, no, we've received feedback on this, and the answer is no, that's not an appropriate area for this use. So hopefully that kind of helps.
And as far as your density requirement, did you come up with your own density for employment lands, or is that a provincially mandated thing?
Through Chair Hodge to Member Tunstall, that's actually a provincial requirement, but it's through our municipal comprehensive review. It's also based on our previous history of density requirements for employment. We did have a lot of comments about this in the spring when we presented these employment land needs in April and also in June for policy directions, because it has to do with obviously the land needs. But it also has to do with our actual forecast of growth. So it's a calculus-based calculation for our land needs. Oh, I think someone's phone's ringing.
It's mine.
Oh,
Just more.
maybe I was going to say go on mute. Oh, there he goes. So I know there's been questions about our 15 jobs per hectare. But the problem is when you raise that density, it also, you have to look at the actual specific uses and the types of businesses. For instance, in terms of, it's a balanced need through the whole county, not just one specific area. So the calculation's based on not just prestige, but it's also based on rural lands and also in terms of our employment lands in Paris and St. George. Because as higher density you go, you're looking at more office type uses, things like that. So we looked at the type of uses that the county is attracting, which is a lot of large scale parcels for warehousing, industrial complexes and things like that. So we felt it a fair approach in that case. So
Because I've been noticing that a lot of it seems to be like huge warehouses or huge amounts. And it doesn't look like there's a lot of employment going along with that. So it seems like you're taking a lot of land for not much employment. And I'm wondering if there's a way to balance that out more so you don't have to take as much prime farmland. For example, there was one up near Rest Acres Road where there's farmland to the west. I'm just wondering if we need to be taking prime farmland rather than increasing the density of jobs per acre.
no, that's actually a very fair question, but perhaps I could get Matt or Pam to jump in here, because the types of businesses that are being attracted to the Power Line 403 Rest Acres corridor, there's actually quite a few jobs that are being generated with the Ford proposal, Evergreen, also some other big name developers that are coming, and they are attracting some very high amount of jobs. So it's all balanced out, but perhaps if I could implore to ask Matt to jump in on this.
Through the chair, I can't give you too much information because a lot of the information is preliminary. Ben has highlighted one of the big employers that has recently come to the county and is, their buildings under construction, and that's the Ford plant. We do have some other big players that are looking at the 403 Rest Acres area to move some of their industry here. So yeah, I can't unfortunately give you too much information because a lot of it's not public information and it's private and confidential at this point, but I can say that we are working with some big players in that area.
Okay, thanks. So are they, when they apply, do they give you density numbers when they say this is what we intend to do?
Yes, through the chair to committee, Tunstall, that's correct. It's they do have to give us those density numbers. We're looking always curious about how many jobs that they're creating. So stay tuned. We've got some interesting things hopefully to share with everybody in the coming months.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for committee this time?
Oh, sorry, I had one other comment.
I think you're muted, Richard.
Sorry, thank you. I had one other comment, and that was, and I can't find it on my scrolling here. It was about severances for, I forget what you called it, you had a term for it. When people sever off an acre, a house in an acre. And I'm just wondering if there's been any consideration for saying, instead of severing a farm in 1 acre, you could just sever a farm in 10 acres, so that might encourage small, intensive agriculture rather than just residential.
Through the chair, I can jump in on this one. I'm assuming your question's more directed towards our official plan and how policies would potentially change in our agricultural severance section of the OP. But I'm happy to answer this one. It'd be very challenging to allow much more than an acre of a severance at a time around a surplus farm dwelling severance. The big issue with that is that you're potentially taking more land out of the agricultural area and creating large estate lots. Unfortunately, we can't make them use it for agricultural purposes. Like for instance, they could just they could just grow grass or something like that. So by limiting the area that they can take out for surplus farm dwelling severances, we're limiting the area that can be used for residential uses in the agricultural area. And then by limiting that size, we're also limiting the incidence of conflict between residential uses, which are considered sensitive uses, and agricultural uses. So hopefully that answers your question, but if there's anyone, Brandon, if you'd like to add to that, go for it.
If I could, Chair Hodge, through you. So just as a side note about kind of land fragmentation. So we do see there is a bit of kind of a dichotomy between, you say, intensive farming uses on smaller parcels versus large farm operations with large parcels of land or large tracts of land. We do have to look to the province for some of the guidance there. So they do give us specific numbers for lot sizes with respect to kind of farming operations. We are looking at some flexibility with that, obviously, to support those different sizes of farm operations. But one of, I guess, kind of the consistent approaches from the province has been to say there's been enough land division that's happened already. If there's smaller parcels of land in the county of Brant that may be better suited for those types of intensive operations, they should pursue those types of land holdings rather than dividing up more land. That seems to be the consistent messaging that we've received from the province. And it's definitely something that we have to consider provincially, obviously their policies to include into ours. So we are trying to find that balance, but that's just something that's worth noting.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I just see it as multiplying rather than dividing, as far as getting more farms, local farmers on the land.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from committee? Seeing none, thank you. Excellent presentation. A lot of work goes into official plan reviews. I know when I was on council, it was a 5-year review, and when I got on in 2006, it was still going on in 2010. So it took over 5 years to review way back then. This time you've done it in 2 years, I believe. So thank you. Councillor Miller.
Just to be clear, maybe staff can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think this was a review. I thought they started from scratch, a brand new official plan. So it was a lot more work than just a review. So
okay,
we're lucky. We're lucky we had certain staff in place to carry this out, because it was. You're right. It was a huge amount of work, and COVID didn't make it easier.
So it's a brand new official plan, not a review. That okay.
Yes, Chair Hodge, that's correct. It's a brand new official plan, and the next one will be done in 10 years.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. So now there's going to be 10-year reviews, not 5.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, one more question. Is there still opportunity to input before decisions are made, or are we pretty well wrapped up on this? As far as and is the Agriculture Advisory Committee going to meet before the end of the final decision is made?
Through Chair Hodge to Member Tunstall, absolutely. We're still in the draft stage. We are looking for your comments. We actually hope that you can provide us further direction and comments at this point. That's why we were actually very pleased that we could meet at this time. It's actually perfect timing. And we hope to have another meeting before we get the final official plan into the province. So I will turn it over then to yourselves and Nancy to determine that. But absolutely, we are looking for your feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's one of our last agenda items to fix the next meeting date. Okay, thank you. So seeing none under number 9, plan applications, see nothing listed. Communications, nothing listed. Any other business at this time?
Chair Hodge, if we can just have someone move the motion just to receive the presentation of information, and then if we can just have the feedback presented to staff and they'll consider it with the official plan.
Sure. Does anybody want to make that motion? Richard, seconded by Owen.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Okay, thank you. Anything for other business at this time? Seeing none. Anything for in camera? There's nothing listed this time. Oh, Councillor Miller.
Just want to ask you, Mr. Hodge and Mr. McIntyre, Mr. Guest, Mr. Tunstall, Ms. Tully, how was the experience on Zoom? Any thoughts?
That's
Took me a while to get in, but it was good.
Okay, that's why you're late. Because I know obviously it's not the same as in person, but I mean, we've obviously debated, you know, committee meetings and all that, and I'm just wondering if this is going to work. That's all I'm wondering. So, because we do discuss some, I think, some fairly weighty issues around this committee. So I want to make sure it works. If it's not working, let us know. I mean, what we can do maybe to fix it.
I'm used to it now because of all the other meetings that I have and the organizations. We've all had to go to Zoom or Teams for almost 2 years now. So at first it's a challenge, but it's like anything, you just adapt and get used to it and carry on. And in a roundabout way, it really saves a lot of time. Instead of having to drive everywhere and meet, you can get a lot more done. And 5 minutes after this meeting, I can be back out in the tractor plowing snow instead of driving back from Paris. So I kind of like it, but it's a learning curve to it, right? So hopefully comes a day when, you know, the pandemic is to the point that we can meet, but at this time, I don't know how we could or how we could justify such a thing. So again, learn and adapt, right?
Tina Lane had her hand up.
I just wanted to say exactly what Kevin said, that we don't have any choice as I see it at this point in time. And I'm certainly used to this. I'm on Zoom meetings all the time. And I think it's an absolute boon, because where would we have been without it? So no problem at all.
On. You're muted.
There's one of my problems. I don't do Zoom meetings very often. I did a few last winter and I learned I didn't like them. How do I put this? I'm surprised that staff has done all this work over 2 years without input from the ag community. Maybe you guys read online stuff, but I don't. If something comes from the county, it kind of gets shuffled way over in the far corner stuff. It would be nice to have paperwork for today. My screen's too small to see any of those details on those maps. So for next time, let's have some paperwork here. Go from there.
Maybe Nancy, if you could pick that up for. And I think I know for council members, though there are those who still get paper copies of everything, and others do everything electronically. So I think if you want a paper copy, yeah, just let Nancy know.
Hi, Nancy. I'd like paper copy.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? See none. Anything under other business at all before we set our next meeting date?
I I noticed this fall, driving a few roads that, and I guess it's the tourism thing. They put up some signs that to tell the wonderful people out of Harrisburg that St. George is 1 kilometer this way, or the people coming out of Glen Morris that the park over there, the GRCA park, is only a couple of kilometers away. Man, we all gone stupid. I'm sure each one of those signs probably cost $1,000, maybe more. I don't know who thought they needed to be out there.
Ellen?
I would just ask that for me at least, I saw those signs and I'm happy to see them. The tourism in this county has grown massively, especially through COVID. And so people who come, I think it's great they're welcome. Yes, Owen, they could use their phone and be digging around. I would prefer motorists to remain safe on the roads and follow the signs. I have no problem.
We all got phones. We all got, most of our cars got stuff in it. Now I just, man, okay, that's my thoughts. I'm sure they were expensive signs. They're fairly big. You name it.
Any other comments? Anything else under other business? Nothing for in camera. So next meeting, when would we like to meet? When would it work for the official plan, the new official plan? When would it be advantageous for that, for comments? Maybe Jennifer could answer that.
Yes, Chair Hodge. Well, as I said, we are in a bit of a evolving timeline, but it would be probably a very good idea if you met in terms of the new OP no later than mid-March.
Absolutely. So early March would be preferable, correct?
Yes, actually, that would be excellent timing.
Sure. So do we want to look at dates right now then, right while we're here?
I can circulate it out with everybody if you'd like, Mr. Hodge.
Sure. Okay. Well, if we kept with the theme of Mondays at 1 o'clock, it'd be March the 7th. Does that sound good? We can circulate it out, but does that sound like a good tentative date? Okay. Okay, Nancy, if you want to circulate that out, see what everybody says, but we could set it as a tentative date, because I know if we don't, it's easy to get lost and doesn't get done, right? Well, we have everybody on the same screen here. Okay, anything else before we adjourn? Seeing none, thank you, everyone. A motion to adjourn. Ken?
I so move.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
See you next month.